What if one careless moment exposed the secret you've guarded for years right when your family was at its happiest? How do you explain the love that defines you to the people who raised you when they never saw it coming? Can a single letter force you to choose between the family that shaped you and the man who completes you? Grayson Thompson stood in the sunlit living room of his parents' two-story home in suburban Los Angeles, wiping sweat from his forehead as he adjusted the last string of fairy lights along the mantel. The house smelled of fresh lilies and roasted chicken, his mother's signature anniversary dish, and the chatter of arriving relatives already filled the air like a warm blanket. Today marked 30 years since Robert and Elaine Thompson said, "I do," and Grayson had spent the past week helping plan every detail from the vintage photo display to the custom cake that read, "Forever starts here." At 26, he knew this party was more than a celebration. It was the one day his parents let themselves believe everything in their world was perfect. He reached into the old oak sideboard to pull out a stack of yellowed envelopes for the memory table when his elbow knocked the drawer off its track. A small bundle of letters spilled across the carpet, one envelope landing face up with handwriting he knew too well. His heart stuttered. The elegant script on the front read simply, "For Grayson, when you're ready." It was from Anthony, the man who had quietly become the center of his universe over the last 2 years. Grayson snatched it up, pulse racing, but in the rush of greeting his aunt, he tucked it back without noticing the loose flap. By 6 o'clock, the house glowed with candlelight and laughter. Robert raised a toast to the woman who had stood by him through every promotion and every late night at the accounting firm. Elaine beamed in her pale blue dress, hugging guests and reminding everyone how lucky they were. Grayson smiled from the sidelines, nodding at compliments about how handsome he looked in his navy button-down. No one knew that the reason he had stayed single in their eyes was the tall architect with kind brown eyes and a quiet laugh who waited for him across town. Anthony had texted earlier, "I'm proud of you for being there even if I can't be. Call me after." Grayson had replied with a heart emoji, feeling the familiar ache of secrecy. The evening flowed smoothly until Elaine decided to show her sister the old love letters Robert had written her during their engagement. She opened the sideboard again, and the same bundle tumbled out. This time the stray envelope caught her eye. She picked it up, curiosity turning to confusion as she unfolded the single page. Her lips moved silently at first, then her face drained of color. "Robert, come here." Her voice cracked like thin ice. The room quieted. Grayson froze halfway across the floor. His mother's hand trembled as she read aloud the opening lines. "My dearest Grayson, every time I watch you smile, I realize I was never truly alive until you let me in. 2 years of stolen moments, and I still fall harder every day. I love you more than I ever thought possible, Anthony." The words hung in the air, heavier than the anniversary cake. Robert's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood. Aunts, uncles, and cousins stared, mouths open. Grayson felt the floor tilt beneath him. The secret he had buried since college, the truth he had protected to keep this exact moment intact, was now spilled across the anniversary table like spilled wine, staining everything. His father's voice cut through the silence, low and dangerous. "What the hell is this, Grayson?" Elaine looked up, eyes brimming with tears that mixed hurt and disbelief. "You're seeing a man? And you brought this into our home on our day?" The questions landed like blows. Grayson opened his mouth, but no sound came. The fairy lights blurred in his vision. In that single heartbeat, the perfect anniversary his parents had waited 30 years for lay in ruins, and the boy who had only wanted to protect them became the one who broke it all. The silence stretched until his cousin Sarah whispered, "Is this real?" Grayson's chest tightened so hard, he thought his ribs might crack. He stepped forward, voice shaking. "Mom, Dad, please not here, not tonight." But Robert was already crossing the room, face flushed with a mix of anger and something sharper, confusion. "You hid this from us for how long? While we planned your future, talked about grandkids, introduced you to nice girls at church." Elaine pressed the letter to her chest as if it burned her fingers. "We gave you everything, Grayson. Why would you keep something like this from us?" Guests shifted uncomfortably, some slipping toward the kitchen, others pretending to check their phones. Grayson felt every pair of eyes like spotlights. He had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in the shower, in the car, but never with 30 people watching, and never on the day meant to honor his parents' love. "It's not what you think," he started, but the words died when his father slammed a fist on the table. It's exactly what we think. You're gay and you let us celebrate 30 years of marriage while hiding a boyfriend named Anthony. The name landed like a grenade. Grayson's younger sister Mia grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the hallway. Come on, let's go outside. In the cool evening air under the porch light, he finally breathed. Mia's eyes were wide, but not cruel. I kind of suspected, but a letter? On their anniversary? Grayson, what were you thinking? He sank onto the swing, the same one where he had once confessed to her he liked boys in high school, only to swear her to secrecy. I wasn't thinking. I dropped it when I was setting up. I never meant for anyone to see it. Inside, the voices rose. Robert demanded answers. Elaine cried softly. Grayson could hear fragments. How long? Does he know about us? What will the neighbors say? Each question carved deeper into the guilt he had carried since he was 16, and realized the way he looked at his best friend wasn't the same way other boys looked. Anthony had been the first person who made the hiding feel worth it, the first who said, "You don't have to choose between me and your family forever." Now that choice was being forced in the worst possible way. His phone buzzed, Anthony's name glowing on the screen. Grayson answered, voice barely above a whisper. It's out. They found the letter. The party, it's over. On the other end, Anthony's calm, steady tone cracked just slightly. I'm coming over. You don't have to face this alone. But Grayson shook his head, even though Anthony couldn't see. No, not tonight. They need time. I need time. He hung up, feeling the first tear slip down his cheek. The man he loved was ready to stand beside him, but the family that had raised him was splintering, and Grayson stood in the middle, holding the pieces, wondering if any of them could ever fit again. The next morning, Grayson's childhood bedroom felt smaller than ever. Sunlight streamed through the blinds he had helped his father install when he was 10. Downstairs, the house was eerily quiet, the anniversary decorations still up, like mocking reminders. Elaine had left a note on the kitchen counter. We need space. Please don't call yet. Robert had already left for the office early, something he only did when he couldn't face emotions. Grayson sat on the edge of the bed, rereading Anthony's letter, the one that had started everything. The words were gentle, full of memories of late-night coffee runs, weekend hikes in the Santa Monica Mountains, and the way Anthony traced circles on his palm when they watched old movies. He drove to Anthony's apartment in Silver Lake, the city buzzing around him, indifferent to the storm in his chest. Anthony opened the door, pulled him into a hug that smelled of fresh coffee and safety. Tell me everything. They sat on the couch, Grayson spilling the details, the shattered glass, the questions, the looks of betrayal. Anthony listened without interrupting, then spoke softly. This is your truth, Grayson. You've carried it alone long enough. Maybe this is the push we needed. Grayson pulled away. You don't understand. They built their whole world around the idea of who I was supposed to be. The straight son, the one who would carry on the family name. One letter, and I ruined 30 years of their happiness. Anthony's jaw tightened, the first sign of frustration. So what do we do now? Keep pretending? I love you, but I won't stay in the shadows forever. I've waited 2 years. The word stung because Grayson knew he was right. Yet the image of his mother's tears kept flashing behind his eyes. They argued quietly at first, then louder, misunderstandings blooming like weeds. Anthony accused him of choosing family over their relationship. Grayson accused Anthony of not grasping how deep the roots went. By the time Grayson left, they were both exhausted, neither sure where they stood. Back home, Mia met him at the door. Dad wants to talk. Alone. In the study, Robert sat behind the desk he had inherited from his own father. I'm not angry about who you are, son. I'm angry you didn't trust us enough to tell us. And on our day, that hurts. Grayson tried to explain the fear, the years of swallowing comments at family dinners, the pressure to be normal. Robert listened, rubbing his temples. We raised you to be honest. Now I don't know how to look at you the same. The conversation ended with no resolution, only a heavy, we'll figure it out, that felt like a door left cracked rather than open. Grayson walked out feeling smaller than when he entered. That night he lay awake, replaying every moment, wondering if the love he shared with Anthony was strong enough to survive the fracture, or if the family he had protected for so long would force him to choose once and for all. Monday at the marketing firm in downtown LA, it felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone already knew the script. Grayson kept his head down, answering emails, but the whispers followed him. A colleague who had been at the party Sarah's husband worked 2 floors up had apparently shared the news. By lunch, the break room went silent when he walked in. His boss pulled him aside later. Personal matters are personal, but if it affects team morale, the warning was polite yet clear. Society's gaze had found him, and it was colder than he expected. He met his old college friend Derek for drinks after work, hoping for support. Derek had known about Anthony for months, sworn to secrecy. But over the second beer, Derek's tone shifted. "Look, man, I get it, but your parents are good people. Maybe you should have eased them in instead of letting a letter do the talking. And honestly, Anthony seems nice, but is he worth blowing up your family?" The words landed like a betrayal Grayson had never seen coming. Derek had always been the liberal one, the one who marched at pride. Now even he questioned the cost. Grayson left the bar feeling the ground shift again, another pillar cracking. Anthony texted, "How was work?" Grayson couldn't bring himself to answer right away. Instead, he drove to the beach, sat on the sand, watching waves crash under the moonlight. Memories flooded in the first time Anthony had kissed him on this very stretch of sand 2 years ago, promising, "We'll face whatever comes together." Now Grayson wondered if that promise was enough. The internal war raged, identity crisis mixing with guilt. Was he selfish for wanting both the man he loved and the family that had given him everything? Or was he selfish for hiding so long? Back at his apartment, he found a voicemail from Elaine. Her voice was softer than the night of the party. "Your father and I talked. We're not ready to meet Anthony, but we want to understand. Dinner Friday, just us four." Hope flickered, fragile and tentative. Yet when he called Anthony to share the news, the reply was guarded. "I'm glad they're trying, but I won't be the secret anymore, Grayson. If we're doing this, we do it right." The pressure mounted from every side, family, society, friends, lover, each demanding a different version of him. Grayson stared at his reflection in the window, seeing a man caught between two worlds, neither willing to let go without a fight. The climax of his hidden life had arrived, and the choices he made now would decide which pieces of himself survived. Friday dinner arrived like a courtroom session. The same dining table where birthdays and holidays had unfolded now felt charged. Robert and Elaine sat across from Grayson, plates barely touched. Mia had offered to stay, but Grayson asked her not to. This was his to carry. Elaine spoke first, voice steady, but eyes red. "We read the letter again. It's clear you care about this, Anthony. But we need to know why you couldn't tell us sooner." Grayson laid everything bare, the nights he cried alone in college, the fear of disappointing them, the way he had dated girls in high school just to fit the mold. Robert listened, jaw clenched, then surprised everyone by saying, "I never wanted you to be afraid of us, son. That's on me for the kind of house we ran." The conversation stretched for hours, old wounds opening, new understanding forming. Yet when Grayson mentioned bringing Anthony next time, Elaine hesitated. "One step at a time. We're trying, but this is new territory." The partial acceptance felt like oxygen after drowning, still thin, but real. Grayson left feeling lighter, yet the sacrifice weighed on him. That night he met Anthony at their favorite rooftop bar overlooking the city lights. "They're open to meeting you eventually," he said. Anthony's smile was bittersweet. "Eventually. I love you, but I've sacrificed too much waiting in the wings. If they need more time, maybe we need to step back until they're ready." The words hit like a wave. Grayson argued, pleaded, but Anthony stood firm, gentle but resolute. "I won't ask you to choose, but I won't keep hiding either. Call me when you're ready to live openly." He walked away, leaving Grayson alone with the skyline and the ache of a love that might slip through his fingers. The sacrifice was his to make now: stand by his family and lose the man who made him whole, or stand by Anthony and risk losing the roots that had grounded him. Days blurred into weeks. Grayson threw himself into work, volunteered at an LGBT youth center, found himself mentoring a scared 17-year-old who reminded him of his younger self. The awakening came slowly at first, then all at once during a late-night conversation with the teen. "I'm afraid they'll stop loving me," the boy said. Grayson answered without thinking, "Love doesn't stop, it just changes shape. And sometimes you have to fight for the shape you need." In that moment, he realized he had been fighting the wrong battle. He had sacrificed his truth to protect others, but the real courage was claiming it without apology. He picked up the phone, dialed Anthony's number, heart pounding. "I'm ready. No more hiding. Dinner with my parents next month, and you're coming as my boyfriend. If they can't accept that, then I'll build a new family with you." Anthony's answer was simple and full of relief. "I've been waiting for you to say that." The second dinner happened exactly 1 month later. Robert and Elaine set the table with the same careful touch they had used for the anniversary, but this time 2 extra places waited. When Anthony walked in carrying a bottle of wine and a nervous smile, the air thickened. Handshakes were awkward at first, conversation stilted. Robert asked about architecture, Elaine about Anthony's family in Chicago. Grayson sat between them, feeling every heartbeat like a drum. Slowly the tension eased. Anthony shared stories of their hikes, the way Grayson laughed at bad puns, the quiet strength he brought to everything. Elaine's eyes softened when Anthony described how Grayson had helped him through his own father's illness last year. "He's a good man, your son," Anthony said quietly. Robert nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement, but it was enough. Not everything healed overnight. There were still questions, awkward silences, moments when old prejudices flickered. Yet when the evening ended, Robert shook Anthony's hand again, this time firmer. "You make him happy. That's what matters." Elaine hugged Grayson, whispering, "We're proud of the man you're becoming, even if it looks different than we imagined." Outside on the porch, Anthony took Grayson's hand openly for the first time in that house. "We did it," he said. Grayson looked back at the lit windows, feeling the weight lift. The family that had once shattered under the truth was bending, not breaking, learning to hold space for a love they hadn't expected. Months later, Grayson and Anthony stood on the same beach where their story began. The city lights glittered behind them, waves whispering approval. Grayson had come out at work, faced the initial gossip, and watched it fade as colleagues saw the steady couple he and Anthony made. Friendships shifted, some closer, some distant, but the ones that remained were real. The youth center became a regular part of his life, a place where he could give back the courage he had finally found. Mia texted weekly updates on family dinners, now including Anthony's name, without hesitation. Robert and Elaine still hosted anniversaries, but the new tradition included stories from both couples, the old 30 years and the new love growing beside it. Grayson turned to Anthony, the man who had waded through every storm. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Anthony kissed him softly under the stars. "Thank you for choosing us both." In that moment, the journey that began with a spilled letter and a ruined celebration reached its quiet triumph, not a perfect ending, but a real one built on honesty, sacrifice, and the kind of love that refuses to stay hidden. The family that once stood stunned now stood stronger because one man had finally found the courage to let them see all of him. In reflecting on Grayson and Anthony's journey, I see how one moment of exposure can crack open hearts long closed, yet also how honesty plants seeds that grow into deeper roots. The lesson here is simple yet hard one. Hiding who you are may protect others in the short term, but living truthfully honors everyone in the long run. Families bend. When given time, love endures when met with courage, and the man who risks everything for both often finds he loses nothing that truly matters. Choose openness, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to breathe free.